My kids are, well, they're just little and they're just, getting into life and school and things like that. And one of the things I've thought a lot about, maybe obsessed a little bit about, is how can I help my kids to learn to love learning? As I've sort of gone through my own life and my experience in different scenarios, lots of experience in church and churches, lots of experience in companies and the corporate world. And one of the things I've realized is that being a continuous learner is a massive advantage in life. Being a continuous learner makes life more interesting. Being a continuous learner is completely wrapped up in becoming the best version of ourselves. Because when we're constantly trying to become a better version of ourselves, we need more input. We need new input all the time. We need new insights. We need new awareness. We need new ideas that spark different behavior, different desires. And so I've recognized how critically important this concept of being a continuous learner is to really just living a fulfilling life. But also, I think, being successful at anything, not only just the spiritual life, but anything. I think wherever you find excellence, you always find people who are hungry for best practices and committed to continuous learning. Wherever you find excellence, you always find these two qualities in any aspect of life. Excellence is always married to sort of hunger for best practices and commitment to continuous learning. And I think the opposite of that is true as well. I think when you find people, you find teams, you find groups, you find organizations that are not hungry for best practices and committed to continuous learning, you tend to find mediocrity. I think it's very sort of depressing to be part of something that's mediocre like that. I think one of the reasons a lot of people are unhappy in their work is because they are part of something that's mediocre, something that isn't even striving to be the best version of itself, something that has just accepted the idea that, we're never going to be the best version of ourselves, so we're just sort of going to give in and just sort of get along. And people can fall into that space as well, right? People can fall into that mindset as well. When we stop striving to become the best version of ourselves, we just sort of give in. We just sort of collapse on the idea that, it's too much work, or it's too hard, or it's whatever. And I think that is depressing. I think that mediocrity goes hand in hand with that very sort of a deep sadness about life and what's ahead of us. And as Christians, we're called to be ultimate people of possibility. We're called to be people who believe that things are possible, people who are filled with a fabulous hope. And I think in order to maintain that, you really do have to be a continuous learner. And so I got to tell you, one of the things I really am obsessed about, one of the things I struggle with and think an awful lot about is, how do I help my kids learn to love learning? And I think one of the reasons I'm so sort of caught up in the concept is because I didn't love learning as a child. For whatever reason, I didn't have sort of great teachers who taught me to love learning. And it wasn't until I was about 14, 15, 16, I was working in a pharmacy. I used to ride around on my bike after school and deliver drugs to people who couldn't get out of their house. And the pharmacist, he became a great friend of mine, and he used to ask me these questions, and he used to say, while you're riding around today, I want you to think about this, and then when you come back, we'll talk about it. And then I'd come back and I'd talk about it, and he'd just sort of blow holes in whatever I said, and he really challenged me to think, and he taught me to love learning. And my whole life changed, in that whole sort of 14, 15, 16 range, my whole life changed. Because of that desire to learn, that love of learning. And truth is, in some ways, that set me up for a spiritual conversion, which also happened in that period. Because I think in order to grow spiritually, we have to be continuous learners. People who are satisfied with what they already know, people who are sort of entrenched in their own opinions, tend not to be continuous learners and also tend not to be growing spiritually. And so I have become sort of obsessed with how I can teach my kids to love learning, what I can do to help my kids to love learning, and what I cannot do to help my kids to love learning. Because I'm sure there's a lot of things that we need to not do in order to foster many things in our children. Do you love learning? If you don't love learning, I want you to think about when you stopped loving learning. What happened in your life around that time that caused you to stop loving learning? I want you to go back. I want you to trace it back. I want you to think about that situation. I want you to face that situation, however difficult, however uncomfortable, however painful. I want you to make peace with that situation and then decide not to let that situation rob you of your future and start to learn again, start to be a lover of learning. It's a beautiful thing. It's something that just breeds excellence, helps us become the best version of ourselves. And when we fall in love with learning, we fall in love with life in a completely new way.